Welcome to the Thinking Stack.
Hey there.
We're definitely not here for the shallow end today. This is where we really grapple with the stuff that shapes our reality, often without us even realizing it.
Precisely. Yeah, we're diving deep into something that's, well, fundamental to being human, but it's increasingly hidden, isn't it? The dark psychology of persuasion.
How we're manipulated, basically.
How we're subtly, sometimes not so subtly, led down paths we might not choose ourselves.
Right. It's that nagging feeling you get sometimes, that sense that the world around us, particularly the digital world, is kind of nudging us, guiding us, maybe even pulling strings.
Yeah,
There's that quote, it really sticks with me. You're not as free as you think. The strings are invisible, but they're everywhere.
that quote just cuts right to the heart of it, doesn't it? Because,
Uh-huh.
look, persuasion itself, that's normal. It's part of life.
Sure, convincing a friend about a movie, making a pitch.
Exactly. But what we're really digging into today is when that influence crosses a line, a darker line. We're talking manipulation,
Tactics that are hidden.
often covert, yeah,
Huh.
sometimes coercive. And they're fundamentally designed to slip past our conscious awareness, our critical thinking.
Okay. And to really get a handle on this slippery subject, we're going to use our framework, the integrated thinking stack.
Right, the 7 layers.
7 distinct layers of analysis to sort of peel back the illusions and understand what's really going on underneath. It's like a structured way to bring some clarity to this deliberately murky area.
Exactly, it gives us a map. So let's start at the bottom, layer 1, cognitive cleanse. What's actually true? What can we say is demonstrably real about manipulation in our world? Let's just cut through that comforting idea that it's rare or it only happens to, other people.
Okay, lay it on us. The core truth. Might be uncomfortable.
It probably is. The core truth we need to face right up front is this. Manipulation isn't some fringe thing. It's not the exception.
It's the norm.
Increasingly, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially within these digital ecosystems that just dominate our lives now.
Right, you mean the apps, the ads.
Absolutely. Think about it. Every app you use, every ad you see scroll past, every news feed, influencers, even sometimes just acquaintances,
They can all be running persuasion operations.
they can. Sometimes consciously, deliberately. Other times, it's just sort of baked into the system. It's what the system rewards, engagement, clicks, whatever.
It really feels like the whole digital architecture is maybe not intentionally malicious always, but engineered for influence in ways we don't fully get.
And the scale is just
Yeah.
huge. Remember that Oxford Internet Institute research?
Oh, yeah, that was eye-opening. What was it they found?
Organized social media manipulation campaigns operating in, get this, 81 countries.
81. Wow. And wasn't that number growing?
There was, up 15% from their previous count, which just tells you this is escalating fast.
And the scary part, the purpose.
Yeah, the really sobering part. In 93% of those countries, these campaigns were explicitly political.
So not just selling sneakers.
Not just selling sneakers. This is about shaping political talk, influencing elections, steering whole societies. This isn't organic public opinion we're seeing online a lot of the time. It's often manufactured, a constructed reality.
Makes you really question what's real and what's engineered. And it's not just those big political things, is it? I mean, remember that Facebook study, the emotional contagion one,
Yes, that hit home for a lot of folks.
because it showed the platform's power, right, without people knowing.
Starkly, yeah. They basically tweaked users' news feeds, showed some people more positive stuff, others more negative stuff, just to see if they could subtly shift their emotional state.
And did they?
They did. They demonstrably changed people's reported moods, which, when you really stop and think about it, is pretty unsettling.
Yeah, it means our feelings, our supposedly internal states, can be nudged by the info we see without us even knowing someone's pulling the lever.
Exactly. So, look, we're not just talking about being convinced to buy, I don't know, a certain coffee brand. This is way more fundamental.
It's about shaping our whole perception.
Our perceptions, our beliefs, even our emotional landscape, it's selling distorted realities.
Yeah.
Carefully curated stories designed to subtly steer us.
It reminds me of that Robert Greene quote, the chilling one.
Which one's that?
The greatest manipulation is to convince others they are in control when in fact you are the puppet master.
Oof. Yeah. That's potent.
It really underscores the potential for these unseen forces.
It does. And navigating this environment, this digital reality that's just built to influence us constantly. Well, the whole idea of pure, unadulterated free will, it starts to look a bit fragile, doesn't it?
Yeah, you have to wonder how much is really us choosing.
It forces us to confront that maybe our choices, our beliefs, aren't quite as purely our own as we'd like to think.
Okay, so that's the blunt truth from layer one. Manipulation is everywhere, it's big, and it's often hidden.
Right. So now we climb up a level. Layer 2, moral intelligence. We have to grapple with the ethics of all this.
When does persuasion tip over into manipulation that's morally wrong?
And this is where it gets really tricky, doesn't it? Because, like we said, persuasion itself isn't automatically bad.
Like a teacher inspiring a student,
Right.
or a doctor explaining why you need a treatment.
Exactly. Those are acts of influence, sure, but we generally see them as ethical.
Because there's transparency, ideally. The intent is clear, the info is supposed to be objective, and the person can, make their own informed choice.
Precisely. Ethical persuasion usually involves openness, respect for the other person's autonomy, giving them enough information to exercise their free will. But what we often see, especially online, is a massive power imbalance.
You mean like huge companies?
Huge corporations, yeah.
Yeah.
Sophisticated actors, they've got tons of data insights from behavioral science, neuroscience, AI power.
And on the other side is just us, often distracted, maybe feeling vulnerable, or just totally unaware of the psychological triggers being pulled.
Right. That asymmetry, that power difference is a huge factor in telling ethical persuasion apart from manipulation.
The Cambridge Analytica scandal feels like the poster child for this imbalance, right?
Absolutely. A chilling case study. They scraped data, was it 87 million Facebook profiles?
Something like that, yeah. Often without real consent.
And used that data to build these incredibly detailed psych profiles.
And then they basically weaponize it.
Pretty much. Targeted people with hyper-personalized political ads, trying to sway opinions on huge things like Brexit, the 2016 U.S. election.
Where was the transparency in that? Where was the informed consent?
Exactly. The people whose data was used. Largely clueless about the profiling, the targeted manipulation they were facing. That's a massive ethical breach. Way beyond persuasion. That's calculated manipulation, industrialized.
And it's not just big tech and politics, right? You see similar ethically murky tactics elsewhere, like maybe the wellness world.
Oh, definitely. Think about some charismatic gurus or certain self-help movements. Some have faced accusations of using techniques like, say, sleep deprivation during retreats.
Or extreme diets, intense group pressure.
Right. Things designed to break down someone's existing sense of self. And critics argue, look, the real goal sometimes isn't genuine growth.
It's about making people more suggestible, more dependent.
Exactly. More dependent on the leader, on their specific ideology. It's a kind of psychological manipulation dressed up as empowerment.
So, how do we draw that line, ethically speaking? What questions should we ask?
I think a crucial one is always, who really benefits here?
Right. And who bears the potential cost? Financial, emotional, psychological.
And maybe the biggest one, who holds the power in this exchange?
That power dynamic keeps coming up.
Because it's key. When one side has way more information, more resources, more control over the whole situation, the potential for manipulation just skyrockets.
So when influence operates outside our awareness, when we're steered without knowing how or why, that's ethically dubious.
Deeply dubious. Some would even argue it's a form of psychological violence, especially when it undermines our autonomy, our ability to choose for ourselves.
That's a heavy thought. Okay, let's keep climbing. Layer 3, systemic foresight. What happens if these manipulative practices get baked into our systems, our tech long-term? What are the consequences for society?
Well, if manipulation becomes a default setting, the foundations of our shared reality start to crack. It sounds dramatic, I know, but...
Unpack that. How does systemic manipulation break reality?
Okay, take democracy. If political discussion is just driven by emotional memes, outrage amplified by algorithms, micro-targeted propaganda, what happens to actual reasoned debate? Finding common ground.
It just fragments everyone in their own bubble.
It risks collapsing into exactly that, fragmented echo chambers. Or look at the economy.
How does it affect that?
Markets can get totally warped by manufactured hype, FOMO, fear of missing out, engineered on social media, constant, often unreal social comparison.
So we stop focusing on real needs and just chase trends.
We shift focus away from genuine needs, genuine values, towards chasing fleeting trends, superficial status markers. And what about individual well-being, mental health?
We're already seeing worrying trends there.
Exactly. And those could get much worse.
Yeah.
Think about the addictive design of social media, the constant dopamine chase, the pressure of curated online lives, even big global issues like climate change.
How does manipulation affect that?
Action can be stalled or diverted, Our attention gets subtly nudged towards small individual actions, important, maybe, but superficial, instead of tackling the huge systemic problems.
It's like we're being gently guided towards a cliff, but told everything's fine.
Pretty much, yeah. There's a quote that fits here. Short-term persuasion can lead to long-term societal collapse. What feels easy right now, just going with the algorithmic flow, the path of least resistance,
Can have really damaging long-term effects.
profoundly damaging. Over time, it chips away at our ability to think independently, to make sound judgments based on critical analysis. The system doesn't even need to lie outright.
It just steers us.
It just needs to subtly steer us towards comfort, towards validation, towards fitting in. All the things our basic human psychology craves.
And the danger is how gradual it is. It's not a sudden shock.
No, it's a slow creep, an erosion of our autonomy, happening bit by bit.
Which leads us perfectly into layer 4, embodied insight. This means looking inward, right, at our own biology, our wiring.
How does our own nature make us vulnerable to this stuff?
This layer requires some humility, I think. We have to admit our brains, our nervous systems, they evolved for a completely different world.
Totally. Not for this hyper-connected, information overload world we live in now.
We're wired for spotting immediate threats, for sticking with the group, for obeying authority figures. Crucial stuff for survival in small tribes, you know?
But slow, complex, nuanced truth that often gets pushed aside by these more primal instincts.
And the manipulators know this.
They understand it deeply.
Yeah.
They often bypass our rational thinking brain and go straight for these fundamental drives, biological, psychological triggers.
It's less about winning an argument with facts and more about tapping into our biases, our gut feelings.
Bypassing the critical mind entirely. Think about how platforms like TikTok use those variable reward schedules.
Like slot machines.
Exactly like slot machines. It directly hijacks our dopamine system, creates these addictive loops you keep scrolling, seeking that unpredictable reward. Or think about how algorithms often amplify negative stuff.
Because bad news grabs our attention.
Yeah, our negativity bias. Survival instinct kicks in. Platforms exploit this to keep us glued, keep us scrolling, even if it makes us feel anxious or angry.
And it's not just digital, right? We touched on cults earlier. They often use physical techniques, too.
Absolutely. Somatic tools. Things like fasting, chanting, repetitive activities for hours, sleep deprivation, intense group pressure.
Things that change how you feel physically.
They alter our physiological and psychological state, make us more open to suggestion, more dependent on the group or the leader. It's basically manipulating the body to get control of the mind.
It makes you think of those classic, maybe ethically dubious now psychology experiments.
Yeah.
Like Milgram.
The obedience studies, yeah, back in the 60s, the results were, well, startling.
Remind us quickly. People gave shocks.
Yeah, a disturbingly high percentage of participants were willing to administer what they thought were dangerous electric shocks to another person, simply because an authority figure in a lab coat told them to.
How many went all the way?
Something like 2/3 went to the maximum voltage, even when they were clearly uncomfortable, even when the learner was screaming in pretend pain. It just starkly shows how powerful that ingrained obedience to authority is.
Even when it goes against our own morals.
Right. It really hammers home that our nervous system can drive decisions that our conscious mind might question.
We like to think we're rational.
We do. But so much of our behavior is driven by these deeper, often unconscious, biological and psychological forces.
And the people designing persuasion, the marketers, the political strategists, they're getting really good at understanding and using this stuff.
They're becoming, in a way, sophisticated brain hackers.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Increasingly so, learning to leverage our own biology against us. Which brings us to layer 5, human-centered design. Let's look at the systems themselves. How are they built, intentionally or unintentionally, in ways that make us more susceptible?
This feels important because it's not always about some evil mastermind, right? Sometimes it's just design choices.
Often, yeah. Manipulative systems aren't always born from some grand conspiracy. A lot of times they're just the result of design choices that prioritize certain goals, like engagement, time on site, profit, without really thinking through the ethical consequences for us, for our autonomy.
So the designers understand human behavior.
They do. Many of these systems are built with a deep understanding of behavioral economics, social psychology, even dopamine science. The creators know how real people act, what grabs attention, what keeps us hooked.
But the goal isn't necessarily our well-being.
The optimization function, what the system is trying to maximize, often isn't aligned with our well-being or finding truth or critical thinking.
Can you give some specific examples of this kind of design?
Sure. Think about the endless scroll on social media feeds.
Just keeps going.
Right. It's designed to minimize friction, keep you there as long as possible. Often leads to hours of just passive scrolling, and it probably dulls our ability to focus deeply or push notifications.
Those little pings.
Often designed to mimic that unpredictable reward like a slot machine payout, pulling you back into the app, promising something new, something exciting.
And the algorithms deciding what we see. News feeds, social media.
They're designed to show us stuff that keeps us engaged, which often means amplifying sensational stuff, emotional stuff that can create filter bubbles, echo chambers, where our own beliefs just get reflected back at us constantly. Makes us less open to different views.
Wow. And that stat about YouTube autoplay, something like 70% of watch time driven by it?
Yeah, over 70%. It's huge. It just shows how the platform's design subtly guides us, keeps us watching video after video, often without even making a conscious choice. It's incredibly effective at capturing attention and keeping us locked in.
And outside the digital world, like political slogans or ads?
Same principle. The language is carefully crafted, often aiming straight for emotions, tapping into our values, our identities. It tries to bypass rational thought and create an immediate connection, a sense of belonging. The design of those messages is often highly deliberate, using psychology to persuade.
So the point here isn't necessarily that all tech or all marketing is evil.
No, not at all.
It's about understanding how these systems are designed and how those choices can subtly influence us, sometimes in ways that feel manipulative.
Precisely. We need to push for systems designed with more consideration for our well-being, our attention, our ability to think critically, not just optimizing for clicks or profit. Which leads us nicely to layer 6, risk and resilience.
Okay. What are the dangers if we don't recognize this stuff and build resilience? And maybe, what if we're wrong about how bad it is?
Right. Let's quickly touch on the what if we're wrong bit. Say we overestimate the manipulation. What's the harm in being more aware, more critical?
We become slightly better at filtering information, more mindful online. Doesn't sound too bad.
Agreed. The downside of increased awareness seems pretty minimal. But the risks, if we are right about how pervasive this is, and we fail to build resilience, those are huge.
So paint that picture. What's the long-term risk?
We risk a future where truth itself becomes slippery, subjective, tribal, where deepfakes and manipulated media mean we can't trust anything we see or hear.
Scary.
We could see algorithms subtly deciding elections, mental health crises getting worse because of constant comparison and addictive tech.
And maybe the scariest risk is just getting used to it.
Exactly. That we just adapt, that this manipulated environment becomes the new normal, and we lose the very awareness that we're being influenced at all.
We internalize the distorted reality.
We risk internalizing it as just how things are, losing our ability to reflect critically, to think for ourselves.
That sounds like a society ripe for control. Very fragile.
It is. Without collective resilience, without widespread awareness of these tactics, without building up a sort of cognitive immunity, we risk being engineered into outcomes that aren't good for us, individually or collectively. And remember this key point.
Yeah.
If manipulation becomes the norm,
Trust evaporates.
trust becomes impossible. And a world without trust is fundamentally unstable. It's fertile ground for exploitation. And with AI, deepfakes getting better, figuring out what's real, it's only going to get harder.
So a world saturated with manipulation isn't just about buying the wrong thing. It's about the foundations of society being at risk.
We are in many ways kind of sleepwalking into this.
Okay. That is sobering. So let's get to the final layer, layer 7, execution engine. We can't just diagnose the problem. We need solutions, actions. How do we build that resilience? What can we actually do?
Individually and collectively, right?
Yeah, concrete steps.
Okay, well, it has to start with cultivating deep, ongoing awareness. Consciously auditing how we consume information. Noticing the mindless clicks, the endless scrolls. Asking, who benefits from my attention right now? Who benefits if I feel scared or outraged?
Right. And then actively doing things to resist, like rituals of resistance.
Exactly. Maybe setting specific no phone times. Deliberately seeking out different perspectives, not just what the algorithm feeds you. Prioritizing reading something long and thoughtful over just quick social media hits.
Taking back control of our attention, our info diet.
Adding small bits of friction back into our digital lives can be surprisingly powerful.
Little speed bumps to stop the automatic responses, and bigger picture.
We desperately need better digital literacy education, starting young. Giving people the critical thinking tools to navigate this complex landscape, that's paramount.
Yeah, absolutely. And more transparency from the platforms.
Definitely. More transparency about how the algorithms work, the ethics behind their design.
Hmm.
We need to know how our information world is being shaped.
And pressure them, right, to value things beyond just engagement.
Optimize for well-being,
Hmm.
for understanding,
Yeah.
for critical thought, not just maximizing clicks and ad dollars.
It's a huge challenge, individual, cultural, systemic levels.
It is. And crucially, it's vital to remember something.
What's that?
No one is immune. This isn't about being smart or having strong willpower. It's just the reality of being human in a world engineered for influence.
So resilience isn't about being paranoid.
No, not about becoming hyper-distrustful. It's about cultivating mindful awareness, a
Right.
willingness to slow down, to question, to be okay with not knowing immediately.
Resisting the easy path. Engaging actively. Protecting our own minds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Consciously, deliberately.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive into the dark psychology of persuasion, what's the single biggest takeaway from you? The core message?
It's this, and I'll say it bluntly. You are being manipulated.
Wow. Okay.
Not just sometimes, not just by obvious ads, constantly, in ways you see and ways you don't.
And that's not an insult.
Absolutely not. It's not about your intelligence, your character. It's just the reality of being human in this world we've built, a world increasingly designed to steer you.
So the fix isn't easy.
No. The antidote isn't a quick trick. It's deep, often uncomfortable, ongoing systemic awareness, understanding the layers, the mechanics, the ethics, the risks, and our own biology, our own wiring.
We need to build that awareness before things get rewired permanently.
That's the critical challenge.
Yeah.
Build it consciously, intentionally, before we maybe lose the ability to even see the strings anymore.
Well, this has certainly been a deep dive, complex, unsettling stuff. But hopefully, if folks listening feel a bit more aware, a bit more questioning, maybe we did our job.
Let's hope so.
Our next deep dive, we're shifting gears a bit, but it's another big one. The crumbling ivory tower. Are PHAs relevant in the age of AI?
Ooh, another spicy topic. Looking forward to that.
I do. So if you want to keep exploring these kinds of critical issues with us, definitely hit follow. But maybe more importantly right now, just take a moment before you grab your phone, before that next click. Just pause. Observe.
What are you being fed?
Yeah.
What feelings are bubbling up? What are you being subtly convinced of, maybe without even noticing?
Until next time, stay aware.